Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hotel News Now podcast. I'm news editor Sean McCracken here with STR's Jesper Palmqvist. Jesper, how is life in Singapore these days?
Well, fortunately, it's pretty much the same. Good to see you, Sean. It's great. Good start to the year. We just obviously passed the Lunar New Year, and not far away is another big thing that is celebrated, Ramadan, of course. So between holidays, I think is the, but it's yeah, festivities being planned and everything. So it's pretty good. Pretty good start to the year, I'd say overall.
So, this month you wanted to kick off with kind of a more robust discussion about your home, other than just how enjoyable it is to live there compared to snowy Cleveland, Ohio. But how's kind of the hotel outlook in Singapore these days?
Yeah, I remember we talked a number of months ago, or throughout 24, we talked about how both owners and operators were seeing that continued cost pressure, of course, while also this was the last year when we saw delivery of quite a few new hotels before we entered. The last few hotels will now open, like the Standard is open, for instance. We got the Banyan Tree, a wildlife resort, Mandai, that is opening now shortly, which is an exciting product. It really is something that didn't exist, but then it stops, right? So then it's smaller things happening. So we get a breather. But we talked a lot about, in terms of performance, how Marina Bay had shifted to be the number one performer. Orchard were kind of taking a step back, particularly in rates. And when we look at the first 45 days of the year, it is, and maybe not too unexpected, it is more of the same. Marina Bay continues to perform much better than the same time last year, which was a good show. And if you spread it over 45 days, obviously you remove any holiday things or anything. So it's interesting. Singapore as a whole, first 45 days is up in demand, and that is a Southeast Asian trend. We keep seeing more travelers coming in. It's great, obviously, with the Indian outbound and all that we talk about, but rates are under pressure in this place. And if rates are under pressure with the constraints on labor and rates, then that means profitability is under pressure. Remember last year, profit margins on the full year dropped 3 to 4% percentage points down towards 40 in GOP margin. And most other markets in this region were able to not just grow GOP per available room, but also the margin. Singapore can maintain the GOP kind of the got par because of the rates holding and growing, but margin was dropping, and that's not the same everywhere. So that it's very evident, and you see it's still happening this year. And if you're a high-end hotels in Marina Bay, then yeah, you're doing better than others for sure.
I'm curious, as a destination, Singapore is kind of favorably located in a lot of ways, but there's been so much talk about the kind of international Indian traveler, and it's come up again a lot during this hotel earnings season, like the potential of it. I would hear it's strange to hear so much about it at Alice this year, which is usually very like U.S. centric. There was a lot of optimism about it. But I'm wondering, like a market like Singapore, since that traveler is still kind of new to the world, I imagine that, like from a market standpoint, there's a lot of fighting to become one of the favored destinations for that particular like stream of travelers, right?
I think that's absolutely true. And it's also true that a lot of people simplify it. I mean, it's not a tap you just turn on. People who work
Yeah.
and know tourism definitely know this, but it's such an easy thing to talk about. So like, oh, how do I get that? It is a long-term concerted effort and trying to bring in, and you got to, and as with everything in this region, it has to start with the flights and the flight
Yeah.
capacity. And that was what was so apparent last year when Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia kind of took a lead in that. Now, Singapore has a good flow of Indian travelers, had for a long time. It's about that share increasing. India has strong connections in Singapore, obviously going back historically as well, and labor and all sorts of things, and families moving back and forth. I suppose the good news about this, because I got this question yesterday when I was in Indonesia, and what's the outlook of that Indian, or what other source markets? The good news is that historically, growth from that big market is not going to be jumpy. You remember the whole thing like China, Korea, 50% off and on. this is a growth engine that keeps growing nice and slow and steady, and that's not a bad thing. So I
Yeah.
think it's definitely about everyone who operates hotels or wants to invest, and like what do they want? Well, of course, it's better with an even business mix. And as that
Mhm.
happens in some markets, some don't, but when that happens, the Indian traveler will continue. And then it's about countries and markets expanding and investing in the airports, the usual stuff, and making sure that you have airlift from second tier Indian cities and gateway cities. Because it's not going to boom up and grow by 50% in a month. It is
Yeah.
that nice, slow, and steady growth coming from new markets, while you also grow other areas, right? In
Yeah.
throughout
Yeah.
the Pacific. You don't want too much of one source market, that's for sure.
So, like we would say over here, it's about blocking and tackling. It's the fundamentals, not any sort of like secret recipe.
No, no, that's exactly right. And remember, I think it is worthwhile remembering that and reminding people, because it's so easy. We was like, oh, the Chinese coming back, and it has nothing to do with pandemics or anything, right? This is just
Yeah.
normal tourism behavior. How do you work
Yeah.
together and get more people there to travel? And India is a new outbound market of fantastic, great volume. It still has some, and people shouldn't think that it behave the way China did. India doesn't have the same tour group mentality that China used to have, right? So there are
Yeah.
fundamental differences in how they work.
Yeah. It is funny when people talk about this stuff, it does get elevated to some sort of consumer psychology conversation when it
Yeah.
really boils down to like, can I reasonably get to this place can I get from X location to Y location in an affordable way?
And you know what? And what you say there is so funny, because I was in a think tank the other day and people were saying, and I was Randy from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, Durban, and he was saying, and I agree with that, because it's, even if it's exaggerated, but it's saying like, what about sustainability and wellness and all those decision makers in tourism? Like, yeah, they're there, but at the end of the day, it's what you said. I want to something that fits my budget, that it's either city or the
Yeah.
basics. And that is
Yeah.
true. Even though those things matter, travel decisions are sometimes need to be simplified and pulled down. So I think, and that's kind of good news. Singapore obviously has a long-term plan. And just to get back on that, and you have to remember it's an election year. Now, in an election year, things happen in certain countries, and in this country, it definitely means the new budget was presented by the prime minister, investing a lot of people, but in a election year, it means some handouts, right? And
Yeah.
to make sure, right, that's how it works, to make sure that the population here appreciates that. So we'll
Mhm.
see if that changes the big plan. But I mean, other big events are coming, right? Formula One is still coming, and it'd be great, and more concerts and things will come, even though I am disappointed about the main lead artist that we just announced on Formula One, but that's okay. Maybe not for me. Maybe there'll be more better artists.
Yeah. Well, you can always hope for more, right?
Yes.
So what other news do we got to discuss this month, Jesper?
Well, I think,
What's new
since
and
I was in
interesting?
Indonesia, yeah, I was just thinking about, it was really interesting too. I was in East Java, traveling around. And for those of you who haven't been too much in Indonesia, please go at some stage. It's an amazing country, so diverse. And by the way, they had a peaceful transition of power in one of the largest democracies of the world. So, Sean, it can be done. Um, uh,
No comment.
the um, and it is so diverse, and it is very interesting from a hotel market. Obviously, it's not easy for investments. It's a lot of local owners and land and everything, but it is so for the future, this country, and an optimism around getting things done. And obviously, we're past the election. We're now into a new term there. And a lot of the discussions there I heard was around cost cutting from government. Because this is a country where you don't only have, traditionally subsidies of petrol and things and oil, but you also have a lot of business demand from government on meeting demand. And if they start cutting into that, second tier cities will feel the pinch and need to find new source markets. 24 was a great year, and it started the first 45 days across many more. Not, and I'm kind of excluding Bali as its own little thing here. Looking at those other markets, it's moving along profitability wise, because rates are growing and cost is generally lower, so it's not as dangerous a balance there. And I think it was also an accelerated year and 25 as well in terms of market maturity, placing the right brands in the right place, filling all the hotel classes and scale. So it's interesting to follow Indonesia and how it evolves this year, and great to hear from people on the ground. Less, and you're not going to see much of distressed assets, etc., in terms of investments as well. So I thought that was interesting.
Mhm. So you mentioned before our call that you got a big conference coming up next week, which will be this week as of when we publish this, as opposed to when we record it. So what's kind of the macro outlook as you head into next kind of big event for Jesper?
Yeah, it's a good event here in Singapore. People coming in from around the region. It's focused mainly on Southeast Asia, but we look forward to seeing everyone there and discuss not just brands and what hotel groups come, but also from an investment perspective. And what we're seeing, and when we look at the different data points, it's happening from pipeline and different asset classes, why people think they will invest more in hotels this year. There are a number of different things, and it increased in 24 by a fair deal, which wasn't hard because 23 was soft. So we continue to see more this year in Southeast Asia, particularly Singapore, Thailand, likely to grow a bit as well. And people are looking at the usual places, right? Japan, Korea, Singapore, Australia, Thailand, the tier one cities in those locations. And the reasons is what I mentioned earlier. We're coming to the lower end of a supply cycle. So that opens up an opportunity. Debt costs decreasing. Interesting, of course, when that starts to happen a little bit. Demand and rooms sold across the region keeps growing slowly and bit by bit, and people see that growth. I think the second half of the year has more potential for a China correction, barring any unforeseen events, which also helps as well. And then the deregulations of visa, these open travel ways. And one of the things on that, can't remember which countries, Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, and a few others that are starting to test with freedom of flight path. Remember how all aircrafts need to go on specific flight paths. And if you can do a more direct, you save fuel and that kind of stuff and hours. So starting to play with those things as well, along with visa and openness, is going to help. So it's a lot of upside on that, which I agree with a lot of that, why it should be an upside.
Mm-hmm. So those are the positives. Obviously, over here, a lot of our talk about the economy in Asia revolve around, everything that's been going on in China, but also economic policy from the U.S. is very tariff-centric, and a lot of that is targeting Asian countries. So what's kind of your expectation on that? What's kind of the downsides going into the year?
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of talk about the same thing here on geopolitics, even though it still excludes to a large degree Middle East and Russia and Ukraine. But the tariffs, everyone agrees that if more of that happens and is sustained over a long time, it's clearly not a good thing. But so far, indications are that this is a shorter thing that will happen, that will correct itself after a while, and before it really starts and see a big effect, and you really start to see GDP numbers, say on automotive production from Thailand or whatever, the drag on that later on to impact our industry, that's a big, so it takes a while for it. So right now, I still feel it's a lot of talk, and there's more other factors that are more tangible right now would still be construction costs in particular countries. You still have the classic gap of buyer-seller. But even though you thought that would lower and kind of get closer, 24 was a good year for a lot of owners because they earned a lot more money finally. And that can also obviously create a bigger gap. And I think the other risk is that the airplanes and the airlines and how that continues to move, that creates a bit of a drag. Just look in China. I was reading that China Southern, I believe it is, could be China Eastern, don't hold that against me, that are selling all their 787-9s to change to more narrow body and change of strategy. So when you do that, obviously that takes time for that entire fleet to move. And that's why that airline is like down 8 or 9% in seat capacity right now. So there's certainly some of that risks that are in there, but in terms of strategy, what we're hearing is that diversification continues this year, like
Yeah.
maybe from office buildings and that. So I think that continues, and people want to open more upper mid-scale hotels that you've seen over in the US as well. It looks attractive in pipeline, limited service still there
Mhm.
in large countries. Maybe a little bit pace decline in luxury, but luxury is still interesting and attractive.
You know, it's funny as somebody who's covered this industry for a decade now, I feel like in the last couple of years we talked more about airline capacity and because of not having planes than at any other point um, that I can recall. I mean, over here it's a lot of Boeing related stuff, and that's very different. But it is interesting that that's a topic that's all of a sudden top of mind.
I've learned so much about airlines in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
capacity and fuel and routes and everything. And obviously before that, most people would have been aware that we have two providers of airplanes, two providers of engines.
Yeah.
And those two duopolies have created an interesting scenario, if you will, which is,
Hmm.
and that comes, listen, main companies that lease aircraft have been in phenomenal business in the last few years.
Hmm.
So that's a good business and trading that around. So I think in Asia Pacific, maybe people looked at it more because you can't do anything without flying in many
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah. There's no
So
drive to islands. Yeah.
no. So I think we paid a little bit more attention to it. And I suppose the American the dream for me would be interesting to see if they're finally. Do you think in your lifetime you will see some high-speed trains in the US?
Is that a question to me? 'Cause I
Yeah.
feel like I
It's a quick question back to you. Do you think you'll see in your lifetime an expansion of high-speed trains in the US? Because
you know
I'm
what
saying that because they drive so much change in Asia Pacific.
you know what I the pessimist in me says no, in part because we've
Yeah.
been promised it so many times.
Mm.
Like, I feel like that's the type of thing where I can remember the point where they're like, by 2005, we'll have high-speed trains across the nation, and here we are 20 years out from that. It's just um, the practical concern. The odd part about that too is that we are one single country compared to
Yeah.
a lot of
Yes.
stretches of multiple different countries. So you would think up from a regulatory standpoint, it should be easier. But I think that the opposite is actually true. It's
Yeah, in
hard to
some
herd all of
cases.
the cats required to do a project like that in the way that it would require, and then you have to deal with local politics and who gets the stops, right? And who are the kind of flyover cities for these high speed trains that are missing out on the benefits of that, but have to deal with all of the headaches of these trains passing through. There's a lot of
That's
layers to it.
it is, and that last point is the biggest of them all. Like when
Yep.
you build like a new underground system, like in Jakarta or anywhere you build, it's gonna be like, who made that decision that it stops right there? Who owns that land? Like all this, you can start a really bad can of worms there,
Yeah, and
and that's true.
when every community it touches can say yes or no to it, and they don't get a tangible benefit from it, there's going to be a lot of communities that say no. That is in
That
part the American way.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
what's our sporting update for this month? We are still sadly footyless,
Well, I
although
mean, yeah,
by
we're
next month it'll be back for
yeah, we're
real.
not far away from that. I think there's a lot of other sports that have been going on, and I think the main thing for me was going from lament to joy, and I look forward to tomorrow. And you listen to this, you already know how it went because I'm talking about Four Nations, the ice hockey.
Mhm.
Sweden really failed and should have beaten Finland and lost there and Canada, and then at least we beat the US. It
Wow.
was important.
And you
And
know what?
then
This is a good U.S. team. Like this is
it
one of the
is.
best international U.S. teams of all time. So to beat
And
that
they're
team is
really
not
good at
nothing.
the Kachuk brothers are really good at punching as well. I
Yes,
know that,
well,
just like their dad.
yeah.
So I look forward, and you guys have seen it already, the final against Canada, to see how they drop the gloves. So I think it's been a little bit more hockey and other sports, but footy is just around the corner.
Let me
I
just say though, I know the
Yeah,
the fight off the jump, off the puck drop in the U.S. Canada, the first game got all the attention. And obviously there's a sickness going around Team USA, and that'll impact things.
Yeah.
But Canada has no goalies. Canada continues to have no goalies. I feel like if the U.S. lost this game, it would be a huge upset. But at the same time, heartbreak against Canada in international hockey is the U.S. way. I still sting from 2010 and Sidney Crosby beating my beloved Ryan Miller for an overtime goal in Vancouver. Like that moment is seared into my brain. It is deep sporting sadness. So I won't believe it's a sure thing until the game is over. But if the U.S. loses, I would be a sure.
Yeah, no, and a valid point. Listen, we haven't seen a Brodeur or Patrick Roy in quite a while. So
you know what the funny thing about that is, so CoStar News, which Hotel News Now is a part of, we also have a French publication called Business Emo, and one of the staffers over there, Luc Etienne Rollard Lafond, is actually a Montreal native, and he's told me all about the long-term pipeline of French Canadian goalies, and it is one of his deep sadnesses that that well has dried up. So yeah, no Brodeurs.
That is true. I like that. That's an amazing insight. I like that. Great connections. Well, hopefully, yeah.
But the Sabre, my beloved Buffalo Sabres top goalie prospect, Devin Levi, is a native of Quebec. So hopefully he turns it around.
Oh, je me souviens. Oh, very good. Listen,
all right.
Hopefully they can do something. I think, listen, it's been a pretty good start into the year. And to summarize it is that in Asia Pacific, performances are very similar in the first 45 days to last year. That means China and New Zealand was struggling a little bit. So we'll have to see after the holidays how the rate kind of turns around as well.
Thank you for righting the ship there. I spent way too much time talking about hockey. You opened Pandora's box.
Well, this is the thing. You pick a sport and off we go. And I'm sure that's okay with everyone. You can fast forward. Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks, Jesper.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the Hotel News Now podcast was recorded on February 20th, 2025, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Stay tuned to Hotel News Now for all the latest industry coverage. And if you like our podcast, don't forget to rate and review on your platform of choice. Thanks for listening.